You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, your host for BioTalk. And as you know, we try to find interesting people to bring to our listeners on topics that are very relevant in today's economy and in technology and in science and in the biohealth industry. And we're lucky today. We had someone be a keynote speaker at our BioHealth Capital Region Forum just a couple of weeks ago, Matt Keesan, who's the VP and General Manager Quantum Platform for IonQ. And we enjoyed his conversation so much, we decided to invite him to do a podcast with us. Matt, welcome to BioTalk.
Thanks for having me, Rich. It's great to be here.
Everybody was really stimulated by what you had to say and very excited that IonQ evolved from the University of Maryland. There's a lot of things relevant to the BioHealth Capital Region, and we're going to get into some of those details. But before we do that, there's a lot of people that are going to be listening that did not go to the forum, did not hear you, don't know what you look like. What we're going to do is let you introduce yourself to the listeners, because I could read your bio, but it's not going to be as interesting as what you would say. So, Matt, give us a little bit of your background. Walk us through how you got to where you are today.
Grew up in Rochester, New York. My dad was an architect, adjunct professor at RIT, and he taught me how to program computers as a little kid because he saw a demo of Apple's first PC and thought, that's the future. Although he never really understood programming himself, he knew, like teaching a foreign language, that it was something we had to learn. So I went on to study computer science and literature at the University of Pennsylvania. And then, to my parents' chagrin, I dropped out senior year to play music professionally for a few years, became an EMT, and actually thought I would go to medicine. I loved being in the emergency room, thought I would go finish college, become a doctor. And then one day, my engineering school partner called me up to be a founding engineer at a startup he was spinning out of grad school. That was 20 years ago, and I've been building startups ever since. Became totally addicted to the way a startup is a great crucible for learning and growth and changing the world.
Well, it sounds like a very eclectic background, because programming at a very young age, you could tell us a little more. What did you excel in music, and then being an EMT? So that's very diverse, all three of those.
In some ways, it's all connected. The body is a complex system. Computers are complex systems. Music itself is a formal language, as math is. And so, I always felt like all these things were somehow related. And then very fortunately in high school, we had to do a physics project on some cutting edge topic in physics. And kind of out of a hat, I chose quantum computing. Just the year before, Chris Monroe at NIST had demonstrated the first ever quantum logic gate. So I did a poster on this and taught my class what I could figure out as a teenager about quantum computing. And then amazingly, many years later, I met Chris and had the opportunity to work at his company.
Timing is everything, isn't it? As they say.
That's right. I feel very lucky. I realized early, best thing to do is say yes to interesting projects with interesting people. You never know what doors that will open.
And one of the doors that opened was IonQ. Talk a little bit about your education and then what evolved and led the founding of IonQ, how it started, what was the premise for the creation of it. Walk us through to sort of where it is today.
Interestingly, when I was in school, we had one quantum computing course that you could take, which was purely theoretical. Because I went to college not long after the first ever quantum operation was demonstrated, and it was still largely a mathematical theoretical field. From the mid-90s through the next 20 years, when the first experiment was done, that kind of launched, okay, maybe we can actually do this at scale. It took another 20 years of university research all over the place to get to a point where people could actually start thinking about starting companies. IonQ is a spin-out, tech transfer from the University of Maryland. Chris was at the Joint Quantum Institute, so he'd been at NIST and then various appointments, and then at JQI at UMD doing research with his partner, Jungsang Kim, who's at Duke, for many years. And they published a paper laying out a pathway to a scaled quantum computer. It's probably 15 years ago. And Harry Weller, legendary NEA investor, so an East Coast VC, very rare, based here in the BHCR, he read the paper and said, this is not a paper, this is a business plan. And he spent like the next few years trying to convince them to start a company. And they're like, come on, we're funded by IARPA and all these projects. We are at the top of our field as scientists. This is great. We have our labs, we have our postdocs. We don't need to be in business. We're researchers. After wearing them down over a few years, he convinced them in 2015 to actually spin out the company. At the very end of 2015, they hired the first physicist. Within the next 2 years, there were 10 of us. So I was the first software engineering leader hired. Harry had invested in my first startup. So as he was putting together the company, he was encouraging them, you need to bring in people who have actually built companies before. We're not going to make you do this all by yourself while also being professors and running your labs. So I was hired to build the software stack, controlling the computer and making it available to customers. And then over the next 10 years, we basically grew from 10 of us in an empty warehouse. For those of you who went to UMD or are familiar with the area, I believe we're in their old dorm furniture warehouse on Campus Drive. And now there's over 1,000 of us all over the world, in offices here in the States, in Seattle and Boston, as well as Toronto, Basel, Switzerland, et cetera, and hundreds of us here in the BioHealth Capital Region. We went public in 2021 and currently somehow a $20 billion company. It's been an amazing journey.
It is really unbelievable. We're excited that it evolved out of University of Maryland in the BioHealth Capital Region. One thing I'd like to know more about is, what did Harry see? What was the ultimate technology or product he saw with the research you were doing that could really form a company around it?
Interestingly enough, quantum computers were theorized almost 20 years before we ever even had an experiment showing it was possible. Richard Feynman, legendary Nobel Prize winning physicist, gave a lecture in 1981 basically saying, hey, look, nature isn't classical. Nature is quantum. The world around us is quantum. He was having this thought because they were doing at that time using the world's best supercomputers of the 80s to do these molecular simulations. And they could simulate a single atom with this giant computer. And the reason for that is quantum mechanics. The interactions between all the electrons of a molecule or multiple molecules become so unfathomably complex that we simply can't directly model them in regular computers. So Feynman says, maybe we can one day manipulate quantum states of matter to do these incredibly powerful computations that nature does effortlessly, but we can't do with our most powerful computers. And so there already was a known use case from those very early days, which is modeling reality. So an example I love to use is caffeine, which is a molecule we all know well, a few hundred electrons. To model that perfectly to chemical accuracy on a regular computer, we'd have to build a computer bigger than the moon. So Harry saw, okay, these guys have a path to a scaled quantum computer, which means we could realize one day Feynman's vision and suddenly unlock all these use cases. Feynman was talking about, for example, simulation of materials, drugs, things of interest to this audience, molecular interactions, or how do we design drugs with better absorbency or design proteins or something like this. That alone, absolutely massive market. Harry saw the opportunity. And of course, since Feynman's original proposal, people had realized other things. In the 90s, Peter Shor discovered you could use a quantum computer to, for example, break RSA encryption, the most popular form of encryption used everywhere today, which of course is very valuable to many people.
Thank goodness we had New Enterprise Associates, NEA, in our backyard and recognized the potential, because otherwise we'd still have tenured professors who really like what they're doing without a company.
Totally, yeah. Harry died tragically before IonQ reached its pinnacle now. The company is really a testament to his legacy. It's not often that venture capitalists pitch founders, and I absolutely believe this local community is a huge part of that. There's a reason it was Harry and not someone in Silicon Valley or on the West Coast. This is a Maryland tech transfer from University of Maryland, from someone who's like, oh, I can just walk over and have a conversation and see what's up here. I can see the lab.
So all the Terps are smiling right now.
That's right. And I will say, for those of you still in school or with kids in school, we hire tons of grads from the University of Maryland. JQI is still one of the premier quantum computing research institutions in the entire world. And the technology and people transfer, know-how transfer is just absolutely incredible. We're so stoked to be able to get grad students, postdocs, and undergrads from UMD, both as interns and ultimately as employees every year. It's a great thing.
Thank you for that, Matt. And you'll be inundated with resumes, I'm sure, following the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. We cannot hire fast enough, I would say.
That is a great signal based on what's going on around the world in the economy right now. Hearing that is refreshing to know that there's a company growing and hiring actively.
Totally. There's many companies that are solving important problems, and I don't want to diminish any of them, but quantum computing is such a potentially game-changing technology for civilization as a whole that we're talking about not just building a product, but helping bring about a transcendent future. So yeah, I feel extremely fortunate to get to work on what is an extremely promising technology with applications across the world.
One of the things that some people are confused about, especially the layman, is you hear AI, you hear machine learning, you hear quantum. Everybody sort of throws all that stuff into the same bucket. From a layman's perspective, are they interrelated? Is there potential for them to work together? Are they totally distinct? Or basically, in a layman's version, define quantum as it relates to the other technologies?
I'll take this in two parts. First part about what quantum is, and then maybe how these things work together. So you're probably listening to this podcast on your phone or laptop, and that's what we call a classical computer. Works with classical physics. It's based on bits. Probably everyone has heard it's ones and zeros. Maybe you don't know exactly how that actually happens with electrical voltages, but it's just ones and zeros at the end of the day. And that's how we get beautiful streaming audio, video, Netflix, computer games, Microsoft Word, whatever. A quantum computer computes with quantum bits or qubits. Qubits can also be one or zero, but also a complex superposition of one and zero. And that's all you really need to know. It's not just one or zero. It can be one and zero and any kind of mixture between the two. This simple mathematical property suggests that certain problems can be solved exponentially faster or at exponentially larger scale when you can use qubits instead of just regular bits. For those listeners who maybe are a bit more technical and studied linear algebra, you can think of a quantum computer as being like an accelerator for doing matrix math very fast on very large, very dense matrices. You won't use a quantum computer to run PowerPoint, but with just a few hundred qubits, you can solve problems that would require a classical computer much bigger than the moon to solve. With a few thousands of qubits, you could be talking galactic scale or universal scale, or computers that would require all the matter in the universe to build. That's the race we're on. So this is kind of the second part, is how do quantum and AI play together? For sure, these are separate technologies, but quantum computing can actually accelerate and fine-tune certain AI applications today. We already are seeing these technologies being used together in today's world, not just theoretically. So for example, we've demonstrated quantum fine-tuning, which adds like a quantum layer to large language models to boost accuracy and efficiency. We've actually demonstrated on a real quantum computer 3% higher accuracy, 8% fewer errors, lower energy use in these hybrid models with quantum and AI, which actually was especially powerful for these data sparse biotech problems like rare disease detection, protein folding, diagnostics, which is a glimpse of the future. So we think of it as not competing technologies, but rather quantum can enhance AI to learn from fewer data points faster.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Now let's get deeper into IonQ and the thing that we really focus on, the biohealth industry a little bit. So why would biohealth industry leaders who are making decisions around technology care about this quantum hardware race that's going on? And what sets IonQ apart from the others in this race?
The hardware race is the quantum race. Better qubits mean faster path to real-world breakthroughs. IonQ uses trapped ions. We call these nature's qubits because they're made out of identical atoms. They're stable, they're inherently precise. Same technology base that we use to make atomic clocks that the whole world depends on. This means lower error rates, longer coherence time, and faster path to scalability than any other modality. And we've seen like real results. 650x faster molecular discovery end-to-end time solutions compared to like previous classical benchmarks. We did a project with AstraZeneca showing that. We've seen more than a 10% improvement over classical methods in a project we did with ANSYS, doing engineering and medical device modeling to prove measurable performance gains. Our roadmap is to deliver 80,000 logical qubits by 2030, which is the foundation for fault-tolerant quantum simulation at a biological scale, not just small toy problems. We've also recently acquired Vector Atomics, which that happened since the forum, actually, which is bringing quantum sensing technology into healthcare and life sciences. So sensors, simulation, and scalable hardware together create a full-stack quantum platform for biotech innovation.
Excellent. You mentioned AstraZeneca. It's neat to see IonQ, American company, working with AstraZeneca, who's the largest employer within the BioHealth Capital Region, within the biohealth industry. So it's interesting to see the partnerships right in our own backyard that are evolving.
Completely. Being here is absolutely amazing. Obviously, they're a British-Swedish company, but they have a huge footprint locally.
They've got 5,000 people here, basically, and growing within Maryland and Virginia.
It's amazing. And so having, the footprint here has been awesome because there's so much great biotech talent and potential collaborators in the area.
Let's dive a little deeper into sort of the biohealth world. How do you improve biohealth performance around utilizing quantum and AI? What are the different applications? You mentioned a few, like with AstraZeneca, but are there limitations as to what you can use quantum and AI together for within sort of the biohealth industry?
The limiting factor for AI, we know, is how big can your models be? How many GPUs do you have? Ultimately, how much compute can you bring? And the same is true with quantum. How many qubits do you have? The outer limit of our problem size is how much computing power can we bring to bear? That's why our exponential roadmap is so important, because the sooner we can deliver tens of thousands and ultimately millions of qubits, the sooner we can solve bigger and bigger problems. From a limiting factor, kind of in both technologies, just about scale. And we're seeing improved performance in any problem that we can actually fit inside today's quantum computers. We've only really scratched the surface. Earlier, I mentioned medical device modeling and molecular simulation, but we believe there are opportunities for quantum acceleration or improvement across the entire biohealth value chain. Just to give a few examples: chemical reaction modeling, fluid dynamics, protein folding, medical imaging analysis, materials discovery, LLM tuning. So we're super interested in finding partners with problems across the biohealth industry and exploring together when and how quantum computers will be able to solve those problems better or faster or cheaper at scale.
And you mentioned identifying new partners. Are you basically proactively approaching other organizations and companies, or companies approaching you to say, hey, we got a problem, can you help us solve it? Or is it sort of both ways?
It's definitely both ways. We go to a lot of conferences, obviously. It's how we met. People are excited about quantum computing. Most people have heard of it, aren't quite sure what it is. We want to put ourselves out there and say, here's what we're actually doing. This is real. This is now. It's kind of like one of those technologies where, like me, if you heard about quantum computing in the 90s, maybe you saw a little article, you're like, okay, that's a cool thing that might happen for my grandchildren, like flying cars or teleportation, but we're actually doing it right now. We absolutely approach folks as we discover interesting work being done to say, like, hey, we think quantum computing could be helpful here. And we get so many people coming to us and saying, like, hey, I see this technology is happening now. I see the accelerating curve of scale. I see that if I'm not preparing now, this technology could wash over me and overtake what I'm doing. How do I prepare? How do I get ready? Part of that's about developing my own workforce, of course. And part of that's about just working together to see, when will this technology actually impact the problems I care most about? When can I go from, okay, this is a cool proof of concept to, like, this is a real production workload I'm running every day?
It sounds like quantum might be all things for all people, but you as a company can't be all things to all people. You have to focus. Where do you believe IonQ is focusing to where it can create the greatest return on investment and see the greatest results on a short-term basis right now?
Absolutely. Focus is essential. I think it was Steve Jobs who said, strategy is deciding what not to do. That's the hard part. There's obviously a million things that would be great, but you can't do everything. For us, it's all about enabling the ecosystem. So we are focusing on in a few areas, which I'll discuss. Most importantly is building a platform that others can build on. So we have other partners in the quantum space building capabilities on top of our tools, services, and quantum computers so that we can reach so many more customers than we could possibly reach on our own. Every developer that we empower could unlock a whole new use case or vertical. For us, we're focusing on a few key areas that we think have the most promising near-term value and actually help us develop better quantum computers and better services for customers because they're really pushing the cutting edge. BioHealth is absolutely a major area for us. Recall Feynman. BioHealth applications go right back to the very foundational inspiration for quantum computing itself. We're also doing work in AI more broadly that can be generalized across industries. For example, we did a computer vision project with Hyundai using the quantum computer to train a self-driving car model. That same pipeline can be used to train all sorts of computer vision models.
What would be interesting is human genome sciences, which started in our region, mapping the human genome. It would be amazing to see what would have happened 20 years ago if they would have had your technology available to do that mapping compared to what they had available to them.
We believe any large combinatorial optimization problem like the Genome Project or others potentially is a great application for quantum computing.
So really, there's no limitation, but at the same time, you have to be realistic in what you can attack at this particular point in time.
Transistors are cheap, so there's tons of problems that run great on your laptop, and those will remain. It's not like quantum computers displace classical computers. The data center of the future is going to have racks and racks of classical computers and GPUs and QPUs.
One thing I forgot to drill down on a little bit, you say you've got 1,000 people right now, but if I'm listening to this podcast and not sure whether or not I have the expertise or knowledge or experience to make a contribution to IonQ, where's your greatest area of focus when you're trying to hire talent? And how has this region been for you to find the talent you need?
First of all, we built a multi-billion-dollar company out of our office right here in Maryland. The BioHealth Capital Region has world-class universities and world-class talent. Our first head of control electronics, for example, was at a major defense contractor doing software-defined radio, and I think was ready to retire and said, you know what? Rather than retire, I'm going to go work on the technology of the future. And it's not just late career folks. Tens of thousands of incredibly talented people are graduating every year all around the region. And we actually use every kind of engineer in the computer. Electrical engineers, software engineers, mechanical engineers, mechatronic engineers, photonics engineers, experimental physicists, theoretical physicists, optical engineers, and more. We do final packaging of our ion traps here, for example. We even have a former jewelry maker doing some of those very precise steps in the clean room. So we really need every kind of talent to build a scaled-up quantum computer, akin to any large-scale scientific enterprise. The Manhattan Project, the Large Hadron Collider, these projects that have to bring together knowledge from almost every field on Earth to succeed. And that's why, no matter who you are out there, there's most likely a role that could be a fit.
Well, there you go. That's the best advertisement I've heard for someone recruiting right now. So you're willing to talk to anybody.
That's right. We'll talk to anyone, and Rich is even promoting this out of the goodness of his heart. Gets no referral fees.
We have no referral fees. We're not in the placement business. All we're trying to do is to tell people about the fantastic assets and human resources we have within the BioHealth Capital Region to enable companies like IonQ to be formed and really grow and prosper.
I would say to anyone thinking of starting their own company, the resources available here are incredible. We've had amazing support from the University of Maryland, Maryland Institution, of course, but also from Governor Moore and the governor's office, not to mention our representatives in the district. There's a huge amount of desire to unlock the talent in this region and put it to work doing really interesting and powerful things.
Good news. Let's talk about the future now. We've been talking about the present, here and now. Still, a lot of people say the quantum advantage is many years away. What's the biggest myth that you'd like to bust related to that?
Yeah, I think the myth is that quantum advantage is decades away, that it's the way people have talked about fusion forever, that it's something 10 years or 20 years from now. The reality is it's already here. We see measurable gains, published measurable gains in pharma, materials, and AI. We've got over $100 million in U.S. government contracts and over 1,000 patents backing that up. We just acquired Oxford Ionics to accelerate our path to fault-tolerant quantum computing, which is the holy grail of the field, enabling perfect logical qubits. From my perspective, quantum isn't futuristic. It feels like the future, but it's commercially viable right now, and we're proving it.
Let's talk about the future a little bit then. So you're already proving that it can be utilized effectively to enhance optimization in many different areas. 3 to 5 years from now, what do you see that you're going to be focused on or doing that you can't even comprehend today?
Doing drug and material simulation at scale. I'm not a chemist or a drug developer, of course, but as I understand it, the state of the art, if you want to understand the properties of a new prospective compound, is basically a postdoc in a wet lab doing experiments for years or even a decade, working on synthesizing compounds and then testing them to see what they do. And most efforts turns out it's not useful or there's some downside or whatever before we even get to clinical trials, just at the level of basic chemistry. This is my layman's understanding, that just very slow, painstaking process. And being able to do simulations in a quantum computer without having to actually make it and figure out how to do the chemistry or even run experiments to know what it's going to do by simulating in your quantum computer, I think is huge. And so when we look ahead 3 to 5 years, 30 timeframe, we're actually looking at, okay, we're not just speeding up at the edges, we can actually do full-scale simulation of large molecules. And I think that's a game changer. You could see things like predicting molecular interactions in hours or even faster. Drug discovery pipelines, which are already AI-assisted, could be accelerated even further. Talking in this time frame with so many logical qubits, 80,000 plus logical qubits, that's really full atomic scale modeling. And that's, I think, the turning point where biotech R&D becomes fully quantum native.
One of the most exciting things from listening to you would be if you look at the bench research to getting actually a new drug into the marketplace, you could accelerate almost every phase of that drug development process, especially when you get to the regulatory environment where, you're really looking at clinical trials and you have to do all the simulations. It seems to me that quantum could accelerate the rate of the process through that clinical trial process, which is really the slowest and most costly element when you're trying to develop a new drug.
Yeah, I believe that. I've also heard many drugs we have just work basically good enough. And if we could make the chemistry better, we would. We just don't know how. For example, again, I've been told that in many cases, if we could just add a little bit of silicon to certain molecules, the absorption rate goes way up, the yield gets better. Just figuring out how to make that happen is incredibly hard. And your quantum computer could just do that for you. And so in many cases where we have, I expect, full modeling capability means side effects, more precisely targeted interactions, et cetera.
We're talking with Matt Keesan, who's the VP and General Manager, Quantum Platform for IonQ, a spin-out from the University of Maryland. When we say spin-out, actually with a over $20 billion valuation today. Matt, what is it that in this introductory podcast, because I can see that we're going to have to do several more to just keep up with what's going on with IonQ and the industry, what is it that we haven't talked about that you think that the listeners would enjoy hearing today as we just introduce them to quantum and IonQ?
I would just emphasize that quantum isn't just a future for biotech. It's really here today. We're already showing measurable impact, from the molecular discovery projects with AstraZeneca we talked about to improving those engineering simulations with ANSYS. And systems are precise, stable, scalable, and on a path to making quantum truly practical with a clear roadmap to 80,000 logical qubits by 2030. As quantum and AI converge, we're enabling breakthroughs in drugs, materials design, and healthcare that classical systems will never be able to reach. We're never going to build a moon-sized computer. The mission, I think, for us is very clear: to turn the potential of quantum computing into real life-changing outcomes across the entire life science value chain. I think the biggest thing I would say is we are absolutely looking for partners in the entire life sciences ecosystem interested in figuring out how quantum can impact their work, regardless of where in the process they may sit. Would love to talk to anyone and really just talk about how we could accelerate your quantum journey. Please email me, just Matt, M-A-T-T, at IonQ.com, or just go to IonQ.com to learn more. We'd love to talk.
Matt, this has been a great introduction, and I enjoy talking to you. And we could talk for a long time today, even though I'm not a technological expert. I'm learning a little bit every time I interact with you, but it's rare that we have a podcast guest that comes on and says, hey, we're looking for partners. We're hiring. Send me your resumes. We'll talk to anybody. It's very hard to break through the doors of larger companies. And even if you wanted to be a partner, they don't know how to go through that process. Most people aren't willing. It seems like there's a great barrier for people to get access. And what you're basically saying is you're open for business. You basically are willing to talk to people. That's the only way that IonQ is going to grow, is by meeting interesting people and helping them solve complex problems. One thing I would just ask before we close is a lot of people might have the misconception that quantum and IonQ is only working with large multi-billion-dollar companies. What's the role for small emerging entrepreneurs and businesses to interact with an IonQ versus those that have the ability to pay lots of money to interact with you?
We were ourselves, until recently, quite a small company, so we totally get it. One of the reasons we're still so open and interested in talking to just about anyone is we're still a startup. We may have 1,000+ people, but we're growing so rapidly that we need to be nimble and constantly exposed to new ideas. The question we always ask ourselves is, how can we go faster? How do we not slow down as we get bigger? Obviously, very large companies have large research arms who are extremely aware quantum computing is coming, and they want to be ready. But there's also a ton of opportunities for startups to be a part of the burgeoning quantum ecosystem, building on top of our stack. We have partners of every size. The quantum ecosystem is so nascent, you can almost think of it like the 1970s in classical computing, or even earlier, where so many foundational technologies are still being invented or yet to be invented. So we're really interested in making it easy for people to build on top of our tech. That's why we want to enable research at every scale, not just for Fortune 500 companies. We have a research credits program if you're affiliated with a university. You can be a researcher, a grad student, an undergrad with a professor's support. Pitch us a project, and if we like it, we'll provide free time on our latest machines for you to run it for real. To make theoretical ideas practical, scientists need to actually run their projects on real quantum computers. Most people don't have a quantum computer yet, but we do. We're very excited to connect with researchers for who this could be a fit for. So if you don't have a company or a large budget, but you do have a cool project, please reach out. We will fund good research on our machines.
Thank you for reinforcing that you're willing to talk to just about anybody that you think that you might be able to help them solve a problem or enhance what you're trying to do with your own technology. So we've had the pleasure of having Matt Keesan, the VP and General Manager for Quantum Platform at IonQ, as our guest today. And this is the first of several that I think that we'll have coming in the future as we keep up with this quantum race that's going on. And it's exciting to have one of the quantum leaders in the BioHealth Capital Region with IonQ. So Matt, thank you very much for your insights. And if you're looking for a job, you're looking for partners, or you have a great idea, they're open to talking to you.
Thanks so much, Rich. Great to be here. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.